So my name is Amy Snively-Martinez. I'm studying at the Department of Anthropology at Washington State University. And I had the opportunity to work with some students from the National Agrarian University in Lima, Peru, and also from the Center for Ecosystem Studies, a branch campus of the National University of Mexico in Morelia. We did this project. It was a real short-term project, kind of like a preliminary data type project that I'm going to present today. So traditional systems of exchange of tuber seed crops in the Andes have been defined as a set of knowledge, techniques, and practices used by agriculturalists to acquire seeds with the purpose of replacing, renewing, and introducing new varieties in their fields. In this way, the farmer improves their production through diversification, which also helps to diversify the diet and to reduce risks of crop failure. Also, this is important for in situ conservation of crop biodiversity and to assure continued adaptation of crops to changing systems and climates. This also allows Andean farmers to exploit a variety of agroecological zones for cultivation. However, these systems and these practices today are in decline due to a number of things such as migration, replacement of native varieties with improved varieties, and increased pest and disease problems. So what I mean by seeds in quotes is they're not actually seeds that you would think about planting a tomato seed in the garden. These are actually potatoes themselves that are replanted. They're smaller. They grow much faster than as if you planted a potato seed. You get growth and production in the same year. So some of the seeds that we looked at, the tuber seeds, were the Solanum species, the potato, whoops, wrong button, the potato up here, the oca, over here, the Oxalis tuberosa, the olluco, the Ullucus tuberosus, and the mashua, the Tropiolum tuberosum. The Andes are considered the principal center of origin for these crops along with other tuber crops. About 4,000 known varieties of potato alone have been known to be cultivated in the Andes. Unfortunately, the world has lost a lot of these varieties today. Archaeological and paleobotanical records indicate that potatoes have been cultivated for at least the last 8,000 to 10,000 years in the Andes. The variety of tubers that exist today in the Andes has been a result of processes of domestication, selection, and conservation of ancestral varieties. And tuber crops are highly important as food sources for Andean farmers. In addition, they play really important roles in the daily lives of Andean families. So there are three main routes for tuber seed exchange that you see happen in the Andes today. Markets, seed fairs and competition, and then local collections and exchange within communities. Seed fairs are relatively recent. They began in the 1980s, organized by government agencies and NGOs in order to enhance the exchange of cultivars. And they have steadily increased in use since then. There's a lot of prizes given and notoriety to farmers. Traditionally, exchange occurred in the daily and weekly rural markets that communities would come together and attend. They would be meeting places for within communities and between communities. And also between families, inheritance plays a big role in tuber seed exchange, barter, payments, gifts, and collecting from wild resources. So some of the questions that we wanted to address in this project were, how are tuber seeds exchanged how are they acquired in Armatanga? What seeds are preferred for exchange? And what agricultural practices are being used in the management of native tuber seed cultivation and storage? We asked this last question because it's important. Appropriate practices of storage are important to reduce pest and disease problems and ensure viability in the seeds from one season to the next. So basically our objectives kind of follow along with our questions. They were to evaluate mechanisms of exchange of tuber seeds among farmers, determine which crops are more preferred for exchange and which are considered native or traditional to Armatanga, observe how tuber seeds are cultivated and stored, and evaluate the diversity of tubers cultivated in Armatanga. So Armatanga is located in the department of Huanuco in central Peru. Armatanga specifically is located in the microbasin of the, I'm going to butcher this word, Warmi-Ragra River. And the basin ranges in altitudes from 2,000 to about 4,300 meters above sea level. And it's generally divided into 3 zones. So you can kind of see these zones in this last photo over here. You have your lower zone, which ranges from 2,000 to 2,500 meters above sea level. It's considered semi-arid with temperatures ranging up to 25 degrees Celsius. The middle zone, you can see right up here, is where the majority of the community is located. And I forgot to mention, Armatanga is a Quechua-speaking community. It's a Quechua community. This is a temperate climate that is located between 2,500 and 3,200 meters above sea level. And once again, this is the middle basin considered. It's temperate and subhuman. I said that. And then the upper portion, which you can't really see in these photos, but this photo down here is from the upper portions of the microbasin looking out and down, so you can kind of see the community way down here, which is in this photo. It is located between 3,200 and 4,300 meters above sea level, and it's considered cold and humid, and the average temperature only ranges up to 12 degrees Celsius. So there's quite a range in climates in each level, and it's important because a lot of the potato and tuber storage traditionally took place in the upper latitudes, and they're continually moving up because of changes in climate and increasing pest and disease problems. So our methods were a case study design. We used mixed methods, so we used structured demographic questionnaire, in-depth semi-structured interviews. We used participant observation. We did confer with one key informant in the community who was considered the local expert. And overall, 13 households participated and interviewed, and we sampled these households through purposive sampling. So this is an example of the more traditional methods of potato storage, and I'm going to focus on potatoes specifically. We asked questions about the 4 tuber crops that I introduced in the beginning, but specifically in this talk, I'm just going to focus more on the potato because it's more commonly cultivated. So some real common storage, or traditional storage, not common anymore, practices are to store them in caves up in the upper basin where it's cooler, more humid, less problems with pests and disease. In caves, in caves, so covered by reeds. So the hillsides in the upper regions are abundant with these reeds, grasses, so they'll pull up the reed grasses and cover the caves up to protect them. They'll also, and these are looks like some oca that he's pulling out of the ground. This is our key informant. He'll just leave a lot of the oca and the olluco in the ground and pull them up when he needs them. Here's another example of the cave. He's down, and then this is inside of that same cave where he's storing his seed potatoes for the following year, and he's covering them up, and also for consumption. They also obviously use those for consumption for the next year. So our key informant was not included in our overall sample. This is the 13 households from the community that we sampled. And in potato, which is papa down here, I forgot to translate that one, we found 16 varieties overall being cultivated between these households that we interviewed. Average between all the households were about 3 varieties. Oca, we found about 7, 6 in the olluco, and average 3.5 varieties between all the households. And only one household was cultivating oca and mashua. So we asked about the origin, like where are you getting your potato seeds from? And 3 really stood out. These are the 16 varieties that were mentioned as being cultivated by the households on this axis here. And 3 varieties stood out. These are the 3 varieties that was the average between households. The Amaryllis is, well, before I go into that, I'll explain the colors up here. So the four main centers of origin, not centers of origin, but places of origin for these potato seeds were introduced, meaning that they were brought in by NGOs or some sort of agency. They were purchased by the household. They were received from the neighbors, so either exchanged with something else from the neighbors, or they were considered natives that they themselves saved from year to year. So the Amaryllis is a variety that is up here, that is an improved variety. It's more of a commercial crop. So that one was principally purchased for planting. The yunkai, a lot of the residents did say that it was a native crop, but it was also purchased more often than saved. Some of the respondents cited that there was some problems with pest and disease with saving that particular one from year to year, or they got them from neighbors who were a little bit more successful in saving those. And the Amaryllis is the one that everybody said, the one down here, was native to Armatanga, and pretty much everybody was saving that one from year to year and replanting it. They still didn't have too many problems with pest and disease. So post-harvest exchanges, what are they doing with these potatoes after they cultivate them? So there was 4 different ones here that was commonly mentioned, being gifts or as gifts or given to either their family members or neighbors. They were bartered, so used for exchange, and this is for consumption, so potatoes as produce, not as seeds. Surplus sale means that primarily it was grown for household consumption and they only sold surplus. And primary sale means it's primarily grown for sell. So again, the Amaryllis up here were the seeds that were being primarily purchased, and consequently it was the improved crop that was introduced also to the community. So that one is being grown for sale. It's not a native one, it's improved. Almost everybody who's growing it is selling it. The yunkai that was mentioned as being native was used for exchange for other products. It was used equally for household consumption principally, and used also principally for just selling and making money. And the Amaryllis, which is considered a native variety, was also primarily sold either within the community or the lower. There's a much larger city center that's about an hour away from Armatanga. You come out of the higher portions of the Andes. And again, this is just showing the yunkai and the Amaryllis which were mentioned as being native, were also used a lot for exchange for other products. So the households who produced potatoes, often, we didn't find a whole lot of, and I'll get into this, we didn't find a whole lot of potatoes being stored or exchanged as seeds to use as seeds. It was more so in the form of for consumption. So we found that households who produced potatoes would exchange those for things such as beans, other native potato varieties that they did not have access to grow, maize, hens, and guinea pigs. Those households who lived and this was primarily households in the middle to upper portions of the basin, who could grow the potatoes with much less problem from pests and disease. Households who lived in the lower portions produced some avocados. They also had cattle for producing milk and produced labor. And they would exchange these goods and services for native potato varieties such as the Huayro Rojo and the Huayro Blanco, which consequently only our key informant grew in the community. He was the only one to get those from. The Mashua, which only very, very few people in the community grew. Same with the olluco, and the aracacha is another tuber crop that is native to the Andes. Let's see. So we asked about the use of commercial fertilizers and fumigants. So for storage of potato crops, what I mean by organic up here is the traditional practices that they historically have used for storing potatoes. Usually includes some sort of use of a plant as a deterrent for pests. And households are using mostly a combination of commercial fumigants and this traditional pest control. In the chacras, which are their fields where they're growing their potatoes, they're heavily using fertilizer, so synthetic inputs into their fields rather than the traditional amendments that they would use. So what does this all come to? I'd love to get to my notes here. So very few households were actually exchanging tubers as seeds. We only found that 14% of our respondents were doing this. It was the exchange of tubers were more in the form of produce or work for produce, so tubers for other tubers or some sort of produce that they were producing. And the cultivation of traditional potato varieties in the middle and lower basin is being replaced by improved commercial varieties of potatoes such as the Amaryllis and commercial pea crops, which haven't been usually grown up there before, but that's the commercial crop that they find that they can sell in the market to the lower towns. The majority of the respondents use commercial fertilizers for potato production in their fields, indicative of the switch to more commercial production rather than subsistence production. A lot of the respondents said, si no usas fertilizante, no cosechas nada, basically meaning if you're not using fertilizer, you're not going to be getting anything from your fields. And also they're using a lot more commercial pesticides and fumigants alongside their traditional organic pest control for potato storage. So they said before everything was clean, antes todo era limpio, but not anymore because they're using commercial inputs. So generally, all over the Andes, some problems that informal systems of tuber seed exchange that they're facing is availability of seeds and networks of exchange are becoming limited due to migration. It's a big problem. People are migrating out of these small communities. There has been an increase in the degradation of seeds as a consequence of pathogens and viruses, where cold storage techniques are no longer practiced. And also there's been, in addition to this, there's been an increase in pests and diseases in the fields, and they're crouching up little by little in these altitudes, where they've never seen or had problems with these pests and diseases, and now they're facing this. And also traditional crop rotations and the crops themselves are being replaced by more intensive production and improved varieties. So in conclusion, systems of tuber seed exchange that have encountered many problems, mainly as a result of change in subsistence practices of farmers that vary in regards to socioeconomic context and geography. Future research needs to understand the socioeconomic context of the farmer, and it's important for understanding the present situation of seed exchange and just the viability of these seeds and these cultivars for the future. In Armatanga, native tuber varieties are being replaced by improved varieties and other commercial crops. However, people still really prefer these native varieties for household consumption because they're exchanging, as I showed on a previous slide, they're exchanging these for really native varieties that only maybe 1 or 2 people are growing in the community and are still hiking up the mile or 2 up the mountain to store. So they still really value these native crops. They're just finding it increasingly difficult to grow and store them. So that was that.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for one question. We've actually run completely through the break. And the problem is that this session is booked right up to the time when the general meeting starts. So we have absolutely no talk time. So maybe a question, but then no break. We've got to stretch and, whatever you need. But I think we're going to have to have all of the break.
There's a lot of programs. I know the International Potato Center is working in other communities in the Andes. There are the Agrarian University in Lima is working specifically in Armatanga. They have a relationship with who was our key informant. They have a working relationship. There's also a local NGO that's working with them, not necessarily on exchange, but it's on other ways of conserving the varieties and whatnot of the potatoes and tubers.